have to make do, I guess. I don't know. I was just saying I did a terrible job setting this up, but that's fine. It doesn't matter. I don't care. As long as everyone can see me and hear me okay, it'll all be fine. Let me just move the speaker and the microphone here. It always takes a second to get started. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Tom Unscripted. A little bit later than usual because I was busy doing some things, but I did want to try to do a show today, so here I am. We'll get into the conversation, the meat of this in a little bit, but welcome to the show. For those of you who have never watched before, maybe this is your first show, I tend to cover all sorts of different topics. Usually I start off with a monologue that runs 20 to 30 minutes, although today I will be reading information to you in lieu of that monologue that you might find useful, and it's going to be related to the chemical properties. Greetings from the Gulag. I mean, Ontario. I hear that, Peter. You know, God bless you guys up in Canada. I know you got it rough up there, especially if you happen to be a Christian. Lord knows one day we might have to come. You might be welcoming us, which is a little bit different than 1812, right? But could happen that way. Who knows? But anyway, what I will do is then we'll get into your questions. And today's show is kind of a special one a little bit because I'm actually going to be focused. And I'm covering a topic which was a lot of people who have been looking at the, how should we say it? What was the word? The puncture. I'm going to call it the puncture. I like that term. You know, everyone has their own little term. I'm going to use a fresh one that maybe the algorithm hasn't gotten yet, you know? And when we're talking about these punctures, when we're talking about punctuation, we'll call it that. One of the things that people have noticed is that there are magnetic tendencies in some people. They have noticed that there are, what should I say? There have been a number of cases where people have even lit up. It's kind of crazy how that is. And people have speculated with some good reason that graphene is the cause of that. Now, of course, they debunk and say, oh, they never put that in graphene. Now, you can go look up, and the mainstream media would tell you there's no way there's graphene in any of these things, and yet you will read they've been working for the last 5 years on making graphene into an injection system. And so the question we should be asking ourselves is, what the heck is graphene? Because we know there's two things in there that are ugly. One is luciferin, which, if you don't know, is a radioactive enzyme that makes people glow. Okay, and it has certain chemical applications. You can look those up another day, another show. But I'm more interested in graphene today. And graphene sounds like graphite, and there's a good reason for that. If you cut graphite basically down to its narrowest layer, in their chemical processes for this, you end up with graphene. And graphene is an incredibly interesting, strange, and relatively new particle, I should say, that's been found with a lot of industrial applications. And I know material science isn't really interested in things, but think about it. We refer to things as the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Age of Sail. And as you begin to understand when there are technologies that change things, the age of computers, the information age, you know, the age of the steam engine, you know, one could argue the age of sanitation, really. Before toilets, there were a lot of problems. So a lot of times, much more so than geopolitics, technology dictates the future. And we talk about that often on this channel. We talk about AI. We talk about things like that. Good to see you, Vicky. I hope you're having a good time at the beach. Hopefully a tsunami doesn't catch you wherever you're at right now. Be praying for that. And I think you'll be all right for tonight. I have a little bit of faith. We'll get that far. We'll make it till tomorrow. I make no promises. But hey, who knows, right? Could happen anytime. So with graphene, we are dealing with a substance with some very unique properties that was sort of accidentally discovered, but it represents a quantum leap in terms of what material science can do. And to put it in its simplest way, it ends up basically looking like a hexagonal wafer of carbon atoms that are connected to one another. And so we're going to have to talk about material science for 1 second. And forgive me while I play science. I'll play lab assistant Tom. I don't want to be Professor Tom for this one because I'm not that good at science to that extent. But if you remember when you were a kid, or at least if you're old enough like I am, you would remember they used to teach the Bohr model of the atom, where you'd have the orbitals looking like a little solar system. And you would find out as you filled up the orbitals, the atoms became more stable, hence why helium's stable, neon, you know, all those gases are non-reactive in certain ways. And then you have things that are more reactive one way or another. They'd be positive or negatively charged. And at the center of that would be things that were the building blocks of life, like carbon. Humanity and the world, you know, in terms of life, is primarily made up of carbon. And why? Because carbon is highly reactive. It has 4 open slots out of 8 on an orbital, so it swings either way. It's bimagnetic, right? A little bit. And it can do those things. And because of that, it can form very strong bonds. So when you think of high energy applications, you may have heard the term hydrocarbons like ethane, methane, ethanol, methanol. These are all gases where basically they contain a lot of energy because they have a lot of bonds. And when you break a bond, you create energy. Whereas when you have stronger bonds, you don't allow energy to go through. And graphene, if you want to think of it this way, is one of the optimal configurations for stability between different carbon atoms, where they go ahead and fill themselves up so they have the highest tension, the highest energy, and they have interesting potentials that come from that. Now, this makes a big difference because when you think of high tech, you may have heard of Silicon Valley, silicon wafers, silicon this, silicon implants, different thing, just kidding. And when you think of all these things, silicon works because it's a very good conductor that's in the third row of the periodic table. So it's got 2 + 8 + 4. But carbon, being element 6, is a little bit smaller. It's got 2 + 4. So what happens is it's more compact. And this is important for a reason. When things are more compact and you're trying to transfer information between things that are like this versus things that are like this, it's going to be much faster. Dog paddling. But it's like the difference between going from a vacuum tube to a microchip is where we're going from a microchip to graphene wafers. And you need to understand this because here's what you need to imagine. Imagine a future where you had something that was 100 times more conductive with electrical currents, that served as a radio transmitter in and of itself, that was 1,000 times stronger than what you're currently using for these sort of wafers, and that was capable of, what should I say, processing speeds of information transfer at literally near speed of light. That literally is doing it like life does, like carbon does at that level. And what happens, you have the last revolution, and you have the effort of trying to basically make material science link man and machine. This stuff existed. It was founded in Manchester in 2011, and they've been developing it. It's in your vaccines. Okay, I'm not supposed to say that word, but that's where it is. And you need to understand what this is. So we're going to read an article about it, but I'm giving you this with a question in my mind. If this stuff starts being in your body in any amount of quantity, I can't tell you what they're using it for. What I can tell you is what it can be used for. And I want you to think long and hard. And this is all out there, by the way. We'll post some videos so you can see this easy to share because I'm going to read an article. And I'm going to share the link to the article in the crowd here as we're doing this so you can watch it in real time with me. That will be cool. And let's see, hopefully my link works. If it doesn't, you tell me. But we're going to look at this. And this is from the manufacturer of it. This is not anything political. Of course, the most interesting things aren't. It's what you're not looking at that will get you. And that's one of the things, I always focus on in the show. So we're going to talk about graphene. What is it? And I will stop periodically. Let me actually put this up as a separate window because that way I can see the chat at the same time I see what you guys are talking about. And that'll work better, I think, in terms of what we can share with one another. Because then I can read that and read what you're saying at the same time. And I want to be able to do that because questions may come up. And keeping in mind with the limitations of what I actually know, I will share with you, but we'll read it together. And if you see me reading on the screen, this is me sharing this. And this was written by Jesus de la Fuente, who's the CEO of Graphenea, which is a corporation that produces this stuff, okay? So understanding graphene. Graphene is a single layer, monolayer of carbon atoms tightly bound in a hexagonal honeycomb lattice. It is an allotrope of carbon in the form of a plane of sp2 bonded atoms with a molecular bond length of 0.142 nanometers. Layers of graphene stacked on top of each other form graphite with an interplanar spacing of 0.335 nanometers. The separate layers of graphene and graphite are held together by van der Waals forces, which can be overcome during the exfoliation of graphene from graphite. So what he's talking about is he's talking about electromagnetic forces that can be overcome from this. And they basically separate this into little layers. This is like literally pretty much two-dimensional, as close as you can get to it at the atomic level, and that's what it's designed for. And then they can stack these layers to have certain properties. And you can watch videos of this. There's a ton of videos, but I'm just laying out the foundations, and we'll talk about some of these things. There's a lot of technical stuff in here. I will skip to make this easier. Rather than reading if you're reading alongside it, there's a lot of math in here. I'm going to skip over some of that just to make it more readable and listenable for what we're saying. Graphene is the thinnest compound known to man at 1 atom thick, the lightest material, the strongest compound discovered, and it says here specifically between 100 to 300 times stronger than steel, the best conductor of heat at room temperature, and also the best conductor of electricity known. Which is they're showing the values are more than 200,000 centimeters squared per over volts, and then whatever else is. Other notable properties of graphene are its uniform absorption of light across the visible and near infrared parts of the spectrum and its potential suitability for use in spin transport. So let's just stop and go through this. So we're talking about something that is so light you can't feel it, that's stronger than steel, so it can't be penetrated. It literally conducts heat where it just pretty much spreads it very, very quickly, and it's an amazing conductor of electricity, where literally, if you were to put some of this inside someone, you would make them into an electrical machine where they would be a transmitter, antenna, receiver, all in one, and they wouldn't even know it. It's almost as if you could put something in there, and if you look at it's not in this article, but if you look in detail about what graphene does, what it does is it's unique because the carbon atoms are set so perfectly that electrons can't really get through there. Protons bounce off of it because it's perfectly tight, and electrons have nothing to bond to because all the carbon areas are bonded. It's a single sheet of carbon. It's basically impermeable, except if you have incredible amounts of energy behind it. And this is really important. You're having something that is disconnecting you from the ability to interact with your environment. And when you think about, and this is where it gets complicated, right? But if you take the biomechanical model of the mind and all this, and then you take this sort of substance and you add it, you're putting something in there that theoretically could shield, block you, keep you from anything, and at the same time, it could be conductors for whatever signals come in. These are things to be concerned about, and this is the material science of the day. But you don't know these things, so this is where you got to do the deep research to do your stuff. Good to see you, Doug. Glad you're here. Hope you're enjoying the show. So, all right, let's continue. Bearing this in mind, one might be surprised to know that carbon is the second most abundant mass within the human body and the fourth most abundant element in the universe after hydrogen, helium, and oxygen. This makes carbon the chemical basis for all known life on Earth, making graphene potentially an eco-friendly, sustainable solution for an almost limitless number of applications. Since the discovery, or more accurately, the mechanical obtainment of graphene, applications within scientific disciplines have exploded, with huge gains being made in high-frequency electronics, biochemical and magnetic sensors, ultra-wide bandwidth photodetectors, and energy storage and generation. You want to have the ability to store more information. You know, everyone's waiting. Oh, where's the chip going to come? You don't need the chip when you got the smart dust. You see what I'm saying? This is how things go forward, and this is where technology jumps forward. What's wafer thin, where it could be inside you. It can literally turn you, if you want to think it that way, if it was set up right. Do we know it's configured this way? We don't. But what I'm demonstrating to you is what could happen. And I will tell you one thing. This is something that's going to be magnetic. It's going to be something that's going to cause those strange things we see, which no one seems willing to explain. So let's talk about the problem they had, because this is a relatively new thing, and you wonder the timing of things. Graphene production challenges. Initially, the only method of making large area graphene was a very expensive and complex process called chemical vapor deposition. That involved the use of toxic chemicals to grow graphene as a monolayer by exposing platinum, nickel, or titanium carbide to ethylene or benzene at high temperatures. There were no alternatives to using crystalline epitaxy on anything other than a metallic substrate. It used to cost $20,000. I saw another video. It cost $20,000 to make a pinhead of this 10 years ago. Okay, so this is it. No, I didn't get the vax, and I'm never getting it, Justin. But thank you. I hope you're doing well, brother. These production issues made graphene initially unavailable for developmental research and commercial uses. Also, using the CVD of graphene electronics was hindered by the difficulty of removing graphene layers from the metallic substrate without damaging it. All right, Tim, good to see you. Yeah, you're going to like this one. You'll want to come back. Hope you have a good night. However, studies in 2012 found that by analyzing graphene's interfacial adhesive energy, it is possible to effectively separate graphene from the metallic board on which it is grown, whilst also being able to reuse the board for future applications, theoretically an infinite number of times, therefore reducing the toxic waste previously created in the process. Furthermore, the quality of the graphene that was separated using this device was sufficiently high to create molecular electronic devices. And if you can see this, if you're looking at the picture of it, which you may not be able to see if you're not looking alongside with me, but if you're what you would see is you'd see basically a set of hexagons overlapping one another, which is funny. It's the same thing you see at the World Economic Forum all the time. It's the same thing you saw at Cyber Polygon, right? And it's a hexagon? It's a polygon with 6 sides, and it's connected to 6 sides. It's got 6 points, and it's got 6 angles coming off of it. Sound familiar, doesn't it? So let's see. thoughts on, I'm not going to get into too much of that, but yeah, look, they can monitor and some flag social media. This is pure censorship. They don't want you getting information. I mean, in this program, I will tell you the stuff I'm sharing here, as much as it's public knowledge, don't be surprised if I don't get flagged, strike, and shut down, because I'm telling you things you're not supposed to know. You're not supposed to ask questions. You're supposed to say, I trust my authority figures. They say they're going to take care of me, because politicians never lie and bureaucrats never look out for themselves, right? But they can deem whatever they want. See, this is the thing. You don't want to listen to what other people tell you. You want to do your research for yourself, and I don't exclude myself from this. If something I'm saying doesn't make sense, don't follow it. But make sure you understand why you're supporting what you're supporting. People don't. I don't believe what they tell me. I see evidence, like I did when I did Coronavirus Central, that said something isn't right. What could this do? And I look for an explanation for why we have magnetism in these things. I believe graphene is the cause of it, and I don't know what they're doing with it. I wish I did. I have my speculations, but I can tell you what's possible. And once you know what's possible, then the question you have to ask is very simple. Knowing the character of the people in question, what sort of motive would you attribute to them, and what sort of things do you think someone like a Klaus Schwab would be willing to contemplate? And then you decide for yourself, and that's what you do. But if you like hearing things like this, draw a little attention, get me higher on the hit list, hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll continue on. Research in growing CBD graphene has since progressed by leaps, rendering the quality of graphene a non-issue to technological adoption, which is now governed by the cost of the underlying metal substrate. So the cost of this has reduced 20-fold, just so you know, because I've been looking at this here. Which is okay. So nevertheless, research is still being undertaken to consistently produce graphene on custom substrates with control over impurities such as ripples, doping levels, and domain size, whilst also controlling the number and relative crystallographic orientation of graphene layers. So basically, they figured out how to make this into clay. Or if you really want to think of it more biblically, you could say they figured out how to make the iron that's perfect to go with the clay that was God's creation, for those of you who know the book of Daniel. Thank you, JT. I appreciate that. I do try to put out good information, and you know, it's sometimes the story leads places you don't go. And one of the things, the story I will say that happened with that was there was a lot of research out there that did not bear out in light of the visual evidence, and that's something we have a lot of questions about. I have theories. I can't say why, but I can say, I will tell you the moment I knew that COVID wasn't what it seemed to be was the moment that all the elites were happy to let everyone go riot through the streets of America. If they were really worried about this, that doesn't happen. Instead, they provoked it, which meant there was something else going on. And we have to figure out what it is, because ultimately, if you start to believe some of the things that are capable of this, you have to start having a pretty bad motive view of what these people, whoever's responsible, is trying to accomplish. And you have to figure out, how does it make sense? Is it just because they want depopulation? Is it because they want control of cyborgs? Is it because they think this is the only way humanity can survive? Is it because they, there's a huge event coming that we don't know about, and something terrible, and they just want people out of the way? I'm not telling you what the answer is to that. To me, my own thought is that, it's a way for people who are in charge to get people out of the way, and people are going to get sick, and they're going to play the divide and conquer game, and people are going to do the dirty work for them, because we don't understand that, good and evil are somewhat contextual if it's outside of the idea of divinity. I've done show after show on that, not tonight's subject, but something to think about as you go through this is ask yourself, what can be done with this? Who would do it, and how would they go about it, and how are they teasing it? What have they done in terms of their efforts? Shutting people down, extra booster shots, far beyond what the big pharma executives who even would tell you that should be required. So, something to consider. Driving graphene research toward industrial applications requires coordinated efforts, such as the billion euro project Graphene Flagship. After the first phase that lasted several years, and you've never heard of this, right? Flagship researchers produced a refined graphene applications roadmap that pinpoints the most promising application areas: composites, energy, telecommunications, electronics, sensors and imaging, biomedical technologies. Keep that in mind. Being able to create supercapacitors out of graphene will possibly be the largest step in electronic engineering in a long time. While the development of electronic components has been progressing at a very high rate over the last 20 years, power storage solutions such as batteries and capacitors have been the primary limiting factor due to size, power capacity, and efficiency. Most types of batteries are very inefficient, and capacitors even less so. For example, lithium-ion batteries, that's like what's in your phone or this laptop. face a trade-off between energy density and power density. In initial tests carried out, laser-scribed graphene, okay, that's literally they etch things onto this, supercapacitors demonstrate power density comparable to high-power lithium-ion batteries that are in use today. Not only that, but they are highly flexible, light, quick to charge, thin, and as previously mentioned, comparatively very inexpensive to produce. Right, this is one of the things of the future here. Graphene is also being used to boost not only the capacity and charge rate of batteries, but also longevity. Currently, while materials such as lithium are able to store large amounts of energy, the potential amount diminishes with every charge or recharge due to electrode wear. With graphene tin oxide as an anode in lithium-ion batteries, for example, batteries last much longer between charges, 10 times as longer, they suggest, and with almost no reduction in storage capacity between charges, effectively making technology such as electronically powered vehicles a much more viable transport solution in the future. This means batteries or capacitors can be developed to last much longer at higher capacities than previously realized. It also means electronic devices may be charged within seconds rather than minutes or hours and have hugely improved longevity. So imagine that your batteries go and get charged in a minute and they're conducting much more energy and they're storing more data. They're storing more information. What data could it store? What sort of charge could be conducted through? These are the questions, right? Researchers in the graphene flagship are also looking at ways that graphene can be used to improve energy generation, including next generation improvement of perovskite solar cells, highly promising next generation solar power sources with very high efficiency. Flagship researchers made excellent progress in improving the lifetime and performance of PSCs while reducing the production cost of PSCs. Adding reduced graphene oxide spacer layer to a PSC resulted in a low-cost production with 20% efficiency, retained up to 95% after 1,000 hours of operation. A pilot production and a 1 kilowatt solar farm are in the pipeline for the next period. So this is something that can suck in a lot of energy. That's what you need to know. And look, it's a material. It's neither good or bad on its own merits. It's like saying a good or bad. It's like who's shooting and what usage is it. But here's where the good and bad comes in. If something exists and you're not told about it, for instance, there's this great story from World War II where, there were these natives living in Papua New Guinea, and they saw these planes flying overhead during it would have been the Battle of, I think, Guadalcanal, if I remember right. And they were thinking, oh, these must be gods flying overhead because they had no context to understand what they were seeing. The same thing is being done to you with biomedical tech, and then to the doctors, too, by the way, to be very clear. What big pharma and big tech research is, doctors don't know. The family doctor who goes there and reads, what the book says, knows how to push some meds on you, might know how to stitch you up, and that's usually about it. You're not getting Dr. House, you're getting Dr. Mouse. And because of that, they don't know what's possible. And they're not lying to you in the sense that they're being deceitful. They don't know the world we actually live in. And that's one of the things that we try real hard to do on the show, is give you a glimpse of the battles of the future that are being played out today and who gets control of certain resources and the ability to influence people in certain ways. And graphene is going to be at the heart of the story. Graphene will be, when they tell the history, if there's history to be told of the 21st century, graphene is going to be at the heart of it. Absolutely guarantee it, based upon what this says. The usage of graphene in energy storage is most notably researched through the use of graphene in advanced electrodes. Combining graphene and silicon nanoparticles resulted in anodes that maintain 92% of their energy capacity over 300 charge-discharge cycles, with a high maximum capacity of 1,500 that's milliamperes per gram of silicon. Achieved energy densities are well above 400 Wh per kilogram. In the next flagship phase, a spearhead project will focus on pre-industrial production of a silicon graphene-based lithium-ion battery. Furthermore, spray coating deposition tool for graphene was developed, enabling large-scale production of thin films, which were used to produce supercapacitors of very high power densities. Another use for graphene along similar lines is those mentioned previously, that in paint. It is highly inert. All right, so highly inert, what's that mean? Things can't get through it, right? And it so can act as a corrosion barrier between oxygen and water diffusion. Anyone having problems getting blood or oxygen to the red blood cells? This could mean that future vehicles could be made to be corrosion resistant, as graphene can be made to grow on any metal surface given the right conditions. So a future without rust, right? And it can grow on any surface, but it makes you non-reactive. If you're non-reactive, what are you not connecting to? Due to its strength, graphene is also currently being developed as a potential replacement for Kevlar and protective clothing and will eventually be seen in vehicle manufacture and possibly even be used as a building material, right? So we're just talking, this is like cutting edge stuff, but you need to know. This is another thing that's really important. Think about the next paragraph very carefully in light of what we are concerned about. Graphene has long been regarded as an ideal candidate channel for radio frequency flexible electronics. Remember RFID? Radio frequency and even terahertz applications are constantly being pushed forward. As a demonstrated microwave receiver for signals up to 2.45 gigahertz, a flexible terahertz detector, and a demonstration of efficient cooling of graphene-based nanoelectric devices using hyperbolic phonon cooling. The flexible nature of graphene allows for various electronic devices on flexible substrates, such as, for example, flexible all-solid-state graphene-based supercapacitors, wearable touch panels, strain sensors, and self-powered triboelectric electric sensors, all being recently demonstrated with applications such as flexible, robust touchscreen devices, such as mobile devices and wristwatches, closely on the horizon. So what they're saying is that you could have this literally be turning things into a radio. And they say, oh, you could put it on your wrist, you could do that. But what happens if you have it inside your body? Are you listening to something without even knowing it? Is information being transmitted? And I know, yeah, it sounds crazy. They're beaming this into my brain. But what if they are? I mean, the thing about it is biology, if you get it down to the simplest level of it, is a coding language. Okay, if you just look at it from a pure physical electrochemical perspective and you leave the spiritual aspects out of it. If you look at electronics, it is the transmission of light with a certain set of language set up in a binary code. If you look at life, it is the transmission of light, and it's actually, if you want to think of it, it's kind of a quaternary code because you got 4 base pairs, right? But when you work out, and if you work out every potential, it really works out 8. It's octal because you can have each pair and you can have each pair flipped with each other. But you have a limited amount of information being sent the same way. And I'm not reducing life to mechanical. I don't believe that. I believe, in fact, that we are spirit-filled beings and that there are things beyond our physical understanding. These are mysteries. But I also believe that it may very well be the case that if you do the wrong thing, it says in the Bible that if you were to take the mark of the beast, that you would not be able to be saved because literally you would no longer be connected to God. And if you had something that was totally impermeable to any form of matter, what else is it impermeable to? If it's reflective of so much heat and energy and it capacitates all the thing, could it be a trap that you get stuck in? And am I saying this is happening? No, I'm not saying it's happening, but I'm giving you something to think about, aren't I? Because if you were going to do it, this is what you would do it. And if you were looking for an explanation for what causes those weird magnetic effects, this is the best one out there. And there's a ton of articles. You can look them up about the fact that people have been looking at this since about 2016, 2017, saying that this aids as a delivery system. So we're trying to explain the evidence with a reasonable theory. Is there another theory that's out there? It'd be great if we could have a conversation about it, but they shut down the people who ask questions. And if you get too close to the truth, you get in trouble. That's why we're having to do this. And I'm not saying what's true or not true. I'm simply saying to you what's possible. And if something's possible, you have to ask, does mankind have the tendency to do it? I would argue yes. Beyond these near-term applications, one could expect foldable televisions and telephones, and eventually electronic flexible newspapers containing publications of interest that can be updated via wireless data transfer. Graphene, being extremely transparent, is expected to be a component of intelligent windows in homes with potential virtual curtains of content displayability. So imagine for a second that you had one of these invisible curtains, but let's say instead of hanging out, because it works in optical transmissions, maybe it makes a thin layer over your retina and your cornea, and you can see a whole new world in front of you. It just isn't the one you think you're seeing. Can you see how things can get real funny? There was a Black Mirror episode about this, I think, if I remember right, where someone turned into a zombie where they thought they were seeing one thing playing a game, but in fact, they were killing real people. Now, is that a terribly macabre vision to go forward with? Yeah, it is. But could it happen? Maybe. I mean, and that's the thing. We trust our consciousness that what we're seeing with our eyes is what's real in front of us. We have an empiricism bias, But the Bible says, learn to see by faith, not by sight in 2 Corinthians. And I think it's a word worth remembering that at some point we can be blinded by our eyes. Morpheus said the world has been pulled over your eyes. And that is what we're dealing with in a lot of ways as the potential fear. And this is why as we come into the AI thing and you look at the end of civilization as we know. It's interesting. Agent Smith says in that same Matrix movie, this is the end of your civilization, 1999. What have we been doing since then? What have we been enabling? We have these strange algorithms which are determining our lifestyle. And, the World Economic Forum serves in service to them. They literally, you can watch them. They have speakers like you all know what is up there. And he says, the danger is people won't understand an algorithm and they won't support it because they won't know why it was set up this way. I don't have my faith in the works of man. The history of mankind, which as interesting as it is bloody, barbaric, and awful. We are sinful creatures that have a lot of problems. And if you think we're smart enough to do these sort of things, I doubt it. And I have a hunch we've had some help that wasn't in our interest. But these are the things that are possible. So let's talk about what they're talking about this communication. You really need to understand this. And augmented reality is absolutely it. Jen, glad to see you. Timmy, glad you're here. Vogel, glad you're here. Doug, thank you for sharing. Revelation, man. Mystery Babylon. Let's avoid her. Actually, I'll probably be talking about what I'm doing up here in New England in a future show because I'm not happy with where this is going. And I will say there was a lot of good things happening before America. If you were to go back and look at life in 1750 and put government out of the way, you might just conclude it was better in a lot of ways than 1800, at least from a moral perspective. Whole nother story for a different day. Optical communication formed the backbone of the internet age and is expected to be equally pivotal for the developing 5G networks, not just 5G, but 6G is coming. Modern communications rely on optical links that fly information at the speed of light. So does your biological system. So if you were ever going to have an interface with a computer, just so you know, that worked one-to-one, it would have to work at the speed of light. This does. And on circuitry, such as photodetectors and modulators, which is able to encode a wealth of information onto these light beams. Although silicon is the material of choice for photonic waveguides and optical chips, photodetectors are made, that's all right, Dana. I appreciate that, Timmy. Are made from other semiconductors because silicon is transparent at standard telecom wavelengths. Integrating these other semiconductors with silicon is difficult, complicating fabrication processes and raising expenses. It also makes Taiwan invaluable, by the way. Although that now might be changing because this is a game changer. It makes Taiwan a lot less important and probably not so good for them in their semiconductor thing since they count on that for the West to save them. Total aside, it's something to keep in the back of your mind. Everything connects to everything else, right? Also, thermal management is becoming a problem as photonic devices keep shrinking while using more power. Graphene is a promising material for telecom photodetectors because it absorbs lights over a large bandwidth, including standard telecom wavelengths. It is also compatible with CMOS technology, which means it can be technologically integrated with silicon photonics. Furthermore, it is an excellent heat conductor, promising a reduction in heat consumption of graphene-based photonic devices. And that's the big problem with some of these computers, by the way, supercomputers. They get too hot. That's going to make a huge difference because this thing sucks up heat like no other substance, literally. You can see it actually inverts in some ways from what you would expect, which is strange. For these reasons, graphene for optical communications has been an intense field of research, which is now gaining fruition in full working prototypes. Okay. Some examples here. In 2016, the bandwidth of graphene photodetectors reached 65 gigahertz, utilizing graphene silicon junctions with potential bit rates of 90 gigabytes per second. Can you imagine that you could have 90 gigabytes of data done in 1 second? That's insane. That would be like downloading, when you have to think of them as that big, you could download like the full collection of Star Trek, every movie, in 1 second. It's virtually instantaneous, and that's the point. This is what we're looking at. This is different. Already in 2017, graphene photodetectors with bandwidth exceeding 75 gigahertz were fabricated in a 6-inch wafer process line. These record-breaking devices were showcased at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona in 2018, where visitors could experience the world's first all-graphene optical communication link, operating at a data rate of 25 gigabits per channel. And you think about those satellites they're putting up there. If this is just light technology, you can get around. We always imagine, and this is the big problem with new technologies, you need the infrastructure to create it, but the less infrastructure you need, if it's just a bunch of panels and wafers, and you have satellites in the sky, and you have people or conductors, and whatever other infrastructure they're putting in, you all see those towers they're putting anywhere, how long will it be before we're in a full matrix? I was watching a show today, I'm not kidding, Dana had about the artificial womb they've created, and they have this vision of, like, they'll have a pod there and just put food in, you watch your baby, you don't even have to miss work, you have a baby like that. It's disgusting, it's horrible, it's the future they want for you. I can't promise you a better future. I think the future is going to get worse. I just want it to stay human. I'd rather have a dark age than have an age that isn't run by humanity. It's terrible. And yet, Doug, you're right. It is the merging of flesh and technology, and it's atrocious, man. Anyway, in that demonstration, let me get a drink here. By the way, if you like the program, send a super chat. If you want, send a Venmo to @CVCPRV. If you guys grease me enough, maybe I'll show up more often. I'm just kidding. It's just, but yeah, if you like the program, you want to send a little support. PO Box 35, Greenville Junction, Maine 04442. I don't do a lot today, and I don't say a lot today because, frankly, coming on here, it's a sad thing to say. I don't know how much we can change things. I can tell you what to be aware of, and I can just tell you, protect your humanity. I think that's the best thing I can do, and pray for wisdom. You're going to need the Holy Spirit to guide you. This is beyond our easy capacity. Anyways, in the demonstration in Barcelona, all active electro-optic operations were performed on graphene devices. A graphene modulator processed the data on the transmitter side of the network, encoding an electronic data stream to optical signal. On the receiver side, a graphene photodetector did the opposite, converting the optical modulation into electronic signal. The devices were made with graphene AS CVD graphene and showcased at the Graphene Pavilion. So this graphene formed with CVD will form the cornerstone of future graphene-based chemical, biological, and other types of sensors. The sensors they want to put in your body that can give information about everything about you to your doctor and anyone else who has access to it, this is what it's going to be made of. The 2D, and you may already have it in you without knowing it. You may even have it from other means. I'm not so sure that wasn't the little fibers that they had in the test kits, and because it's interesting they keep continuing the tests all over the place. I've often wondered why, and some of you have seen some of those videos with some of the fibers, but we'll see. The 2D nature of the material provides intrinsic advantages for sensing applications because the entire material volume acts as a sensing surface. Furthermore, graphene provides excellent mechanical strength, thermal and electrical conductivity, compactness, and potentially low cost, which is necessary for competing on the crowded sensor market. Graphene-based gas vapor sensors have attracted much attention in recent years due to their variety of structures, unique sensing performance, room temperature working conditions, and tremendous application prospects. Apart from water vapor, graphene has been used to sense gases such as NH3. What would that be? Nitrogen 3 and 3. Okay, NO2, H2, CO, SO2, and H2S. So some sulfur oxide, some other ones, as well as vapor volatile organic compounds, resulting in a dramatic rise in scientific publication on this topic. Graphene has also been used to detect traces of opioids in concentrations as low as 10 picograms per milliliter of liquid. So this thing can be used to tell every little bit of your microbiology. Sounds like it could be a miracle drug, help, get through and allow everything to be known about you, but do you trust the people who have that information? And this is the problem, right? We have a world with greater transparency and less trust. So, and you can figure out, and if you can track those things, who knows, because it can do certain things, maybe it can prevent certain things from happening, because we saw how effective it is keeping things from working from one another, serving as a shield. Stuff stronger than Kevlar, and it's smaller than a micron. It's the smallest substance out there. It's like be turning yourself into a gigantic. What was that little dude? You had like the little metal things. You remember something, was it called Willie or something? You'd shake the thing up and it had the little magnetic balls and it went everywhere. Who knew that would be where we'd go, right? Anyway, this multitude of favorable properties has led to a wide array of investigations into graphene use for biosensing. Particularly interesting configurations are graphene field effect transistors and graphene enhanced surface plasma resonance. These type of graphene-dense sensors have been used for DNA, protein, glucose, and bacteria detection. Using GFET, biosensors with a detection limit of 10 pg per ml were produced for opioid molecules. So this is used to check everything inside you. They already said it's been used for DNA, and it's smaller than DNA because it's at the atomic level. Who knows what it could do at that level? And yet we've put it in there with mRNA that has instructions. What are those instructions? Build spike proteins. Okay, well, spike proteins aren't doing too well, but what other instructions might be in there? And by the way, this is a radio transmitter. What if it'd be programmable? Hey, instead of making spike proteins, it's time for a new variant. Let's go with lambda. I mean, do I know? No, but is it possible? Yeah, and that's the point. People say, oh, that's ridiculous. My point is not to tell you what's true. I don't know what's true, but I am here to show you what's possible. And what's possible is a hell of a lot more than they tell you because they don't want to be held culpable because then they have to answer questions. And I suspect when you look at how much bad faith they've acted with, we're reasonable to assume bad motive. Graphene is also an enabling technology for novel, flexible magnetic field sensors. This is the magnetism, right? The market for magnetic field sensors is expanding, one with size estimates up to $4.16 billion US in 2022. The multiple purposes of magnetic field sensors, such as position detection, current monitoring, speed detection, and angular sensing, allow access to a wide range of industries, such as automotive, consumer electronics, healthcare, and defense. Perfect surveillance, right? A most common magnetic sensor uses the Hall effect, the production of a potential difference across the electrical conductor when a magnetic field is applied. The key factor for determining sensitivity of Hall effect sensors, and by the way, I'm close to done, but I want to get through this because, maybe one of you will get something from this that I wouldn't. I can tell you parts of it. Parts of this are scientifically beyond me, but when you start connecting, you start to see a lot of things are possible. Is high electron mobility. As such, graphene is highly interesting application for our material with measured carrier mobility in excess of 200,000 centimeters per volts per second. Graphene Hall sensors with current related sensitivity up to 5,700 V per AT and voltage related sensitivity to VVT were demonstrated in graphene encapsulated boron nitride. Search performances outpace state-of-the-art silicon, and it just looks like 3.5 Hall sensors with a magnetic resolution as low as 50. God, I can't even read these things. It's NT per. It looks like the squares. It must be like microhertz, nano something, nanotesla per microhertz. That's what it's got to be. So what it's saying is you can literally have magnetic resonance down to near the atomic level. This is how small we're getting. The current practical limit for sensitivity of graphene's Hall devices in industry wafers is around 3,000 V per AT. So if we're just doing this real fast with a change of this, it looks like even using this, they're more than doubling the improvement. And it looks like they can even do more when they get to some of the resolutions. So it's more accurate by double, and it can get much smaller. For comparison, state-of-the-art Hall sensors from traditional CMOS compatible materials have sensitivity in the order of around 100 V over AT. Even flexible graphene Hall sensors produced on Kapton tape reach sensitivities similar to rigid Hall sensors. So combining some of these aforementioned potential uses, one can imagine visionary applications such as car security systems that are connected to the paint on the vehicle. Not only would a car alarm be able to tell if someone is touching the vehicle, it would be able to record that information, send it to the owner's smartphone in real time. Such smart paint could use to analyze vehicle accidents to determine initial contact patches and result in consequential energy dispersion. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, your paint is going to be spying on you. Welcome to the 22nd century. The market will soon see clothing containing graphene-enhanced photovoltaic cells and supercapacitors, meaning we will be able to charge our mobile phones and tablet computers in a matter of minutes, potentially even seconds, while walking to school or work. We may possibly even see security-oriented clothing offering protection against unwanted contact with the use of electrical discharge. Kind of makes you think about the EMP thing a little bit that everyone's talking about. Then they'll say, oh, it's such a terrible event. This happened. How can we do that? Oh, if we're all have graphene in our system, this won't happen. And maybe that's where we'll all get fried. Maybe there'll be a bad event. So, who knows? Just thinking aloud. I don't know. Game changer. In summary, this discovery by a physics professor and his PhD student in a laboratory in Manchester, where they used a piece of graphite and some Scotch tape, has completely revolutionized the way we look at potential limits of our abilities as scientists, engineers, and inventors. Doesn't that sort of sound like one of those things where, it's just too easy? It's like this great story. It's like the story of the guy who invented the transistor. Apparently, he was kind of a dotard, but they ended up, saying, oh, he just discovered this, and we got past vacuum tubes. Or maybe they gifted it the same way they gifted Facebook to Zuckerberg. Who knows, right? But in any case, we have this material. The possibilities of what we can achieve with the materials and knowledge we have been blown wide open, and it is now conceivable to imagine such amazing perspective situations as lightning fast yet super small computers, invisibility cloaks, smartphones that last weeks in between their charges, and computers that we can fold up and carry in our pockets wherever we go. Or let's go further. You can imagine a skin that sits on you, a patch you carry, maybe a wearable tattoo that says everything about you all the time, and that gives you energy. Maybe you don't have to eat anymore. Maybe that's the new future. This thing will just suck up energy, and it's it's part solar. You can walk around and be like a human plant. Do I know this is going to happen? No. But graphene is a game changer. And if you don't understand it's out there, you don't understand the game that's being played. So I share this with you. I encourage you to watch other videos as well on the same topic. I will do you the favor of sharing one other video that I watched recently on this. Hopefully I don't screw up the thing by doing it this way, but I do want to share it for you because I found it interesting, and perhaps if you're trying to share it with someone else, you don't want to have all the problems of having to listen to me read through an article and butcher a couple units, because it's been a while. It really has been a while since I've done some of this stuff. I wanted to be able to share this with you. So just give me 1 second here. I'm scrolling through my history, which is really an interesting history. I mean, I don't think there's anyone, there's very few people this side of a monastery, I would think, that have, copy the link. Okay, good. That have as many things reading old sermons as I have it in mind. But all right, there you go. There's a good video there that will show you a little more graphene and give you some visual effects to go with it. So, do I have an opinion on the SENS Research Foundation, Roy Hobbs? I do not, just because I don't know who they are. Maybe it's one of those things I may have heard of them and I don't remember. I mean, there's so many things to know out there, and it's hard to keep on top of anything. If you're mentioning it in context with this, I'm probably against it without knowing what it is. But I reserve the right to change my mind if I'm doing this other than a snap judgment based on nothing other than timing, statement, and all that. And that's how we make a lot of our decisions, isn't it? Based on our instincts and what we trust and what we don't trust. But we do it in a lack of information, and we are surprised constantly by outcomes we can't explain. This is why you gather knowledge, so you can try to have good understanding of what the outcomes are going to be. Worldly knowledge is useful so that worldly tricks can't be played against you. But ultimately, the world moves faster than our ability to understand it. And that's one of the reasons why I so deeply encourage everyone to get close to Christ, to ask, today is your day of salvation, and to make good with the Lord and ask him to guide you. Ask the Holy Spirit to guide you. I'm a smart guy, but this is beyond me. This is beyond any of us. And we are going to be dealing with things that are moving at the speed of light, where we just move at the speed we can amble up and down the steps. So I just pray that the Lord is looking out for each and every one of us, over you and your families, and that we have the spirit of wisdom and discernment to come through this, and that, with repentant hearts, we begin shedding away our attachments to the world. Otherwise, we may find ourselves trapped here permanently. And that might sound better than death to some people, but if you care too much about your life, you are guaranteed to lose your soul. And those aren't my words. That's basically a finessing of what you read in the Bible. But what you realize is, consider the sort of things that need to get you out of it. And we now need to, we take care of one another, and we realize that, there are people who may be trapped behind this permanently without knowing it. I pray that hopefully the Lord will have mercy on them, and that my worst predictions don't end up playing out. Maybe there's a second piece to this, who knows? But what I do know is that we are at the onset of a technological revolution, that when you couple this material that's being so heavily researched with what's being done with AI, the possibilities in quantum computing we've talked about, and you imagine these technologies being put together, the idea that you can exist as an individual sovereign being that has any connection to what humanity used to be like begins to disappear. And that's why I believe in my heart of hearts that we are at the end of history. And if, in fact, we do not see the events, happen that are foretold, that what will emerge will be a civilization that is post-human. And that is going to be something that's going to be very difficult. And, can I put an exact timeline on it? I know Ray Kurzweil says this singularity will be here by 2045. So let's assume you have no more than 25 years before this happens. I think this is such a quantum leap in what it allows for technology. I think we're going to be dealing with this in the next couple of years. And I have continuously been wrong about how fast technology is moving, but it has a sort of, how should I say, an inertia effect where once it starts going, it's going to start going faster. And I think that's going to be very difficult. All right, let's see. The SENS Research Foundation works to develop, promote, and ensure widespread access to therapies that cure and prevent diseases and disabilities of aging by comprehensively repairing the damage that builds up in our bodies over time. So what are they doing, like telomeres or something like that? I mean, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, the idea that you have medicine that helps people is a good thing. No one wants people to suffer. The idea that you have medicine that tries to prolong life forever, I think, is a form of cruelty. I guess it depends on your nature of how you see the world, and how you see your relation to it. And that's everything. If you think this world is all there is and taking care of fellow humans is the highest calling, then yeah, you probably should be a transhumanist, sell all into it, and go for it in the biodigital age. It's your world. You're going to exist to the heat death of the universe or less. But conversely, if you see this world as sort of a fallen place and you have awareness of the fact that we do things that really aren't in our interest, despite the fact that, it doesn't make us feel better or happier, and that you want something more and you want to be more than yourself, then you have to find faith. And if you think about it, when you go to bed every night and you close your eyes, you don't really know you're going to wake up. You don't know the world's going to still be there. A child has the blind faith of being aware of all the things they can't control. And so in that same sort of sense, if we as adults learn to find our faith again, we learn to look at the world differently, where up is down and down is up. And it's a choice you have to make. It's actually the only choice that, really matters. They just received 20 million through crypto, specifically Hex. That's interesting. Digital currencies are going to go and fund a lot of questionable things. And the future is going to be digital. I do think there will be people who resist, and I think that, the potential exists that maybe enough will be changed to change things. But absent some sort of divine intervention, it will be a losing cause. And the question is, are you willing to lose your life to save your soul? And I'm not saying this because I'm threatening you or promising anything's going to happen. It's just the reality of a question you need to be thinking about in the world in the days ahead. And some people are, and some people aren't. And I know that where I stand, and I think if you've watched this show more than 10 minutes, you already understand that. But I don't like where we're going in the biodigital age. The thing is, you're going to deal with hackable humanity. You're going to deal with a situation where you won't be able to trust what you see directly in front of you, and that you're counting on everyone to be good actors, including non-human actors like machines. And pretend you don't believe in any of the stuff, that you don't believe in the supernatural. Fine. You're still going to have to trust AIs and algorithms to make decisions that are going to control your life, and you are going to decreasingly exist as individual beings. You will become something else. So this is the future we're looking at, and graphene is going to lead the way. This technology is actually pretty simple to accomplish based by terms. So this is going to be around. Even if things get funny, I think people are going to remember this one. And I think that as we go forward and you see new things coming out there, you see odd properties, remember in the back of your mind this show and the things I shared with you about what potential risks are out there and what potential opportunities and what graphene can do. And hey, if you can get some yourself and use it, go build yourself some Kevlar, man. Build yourself the perfect Faraday cage. Go for it. I'm not saying don't empower yourself, because the problem is that if one side's using things, you have to figure out how to use it. But I would just say protect the sanctity and security of your own body and your own sovereignty. And that's kind of the message I want to give for everyone tonight. Now, if any of you have any last minute questions, you want to throw them up. I went a little long, but I thought this was an important enough broadcast. I came on with purpose and meaning tonight. I wanted to do that. I don't like coming on in the evening. Y'all know that. I'm tired, and I spend a lot of time in the field during the day because I actually take my self-sufficiency seriously, in the sense that I am not going to let the system box me out of living the way I want to live as a human being. And I recommend you guys, if you feel the same way, do the same. And if you don't, then you're probably watching this channel in bad faith, because I think most people who've been around me kind of know how I think of these things. I will share just a couple of random thoughts passing through my head that I've been working on. I think a lot about some of my political agitation over the years, and I think one of the mistakes I've made is I've tried to make people embrace too many new concepts at too fast of a speed. And I'm going to, if I talk about things now, slow it down a little bit, because I think you have to talk about solutions to everything before you talk about solutions to anything. And I do think as this system goes forward, we are seeing in multiple countries, in France, in Greece, don't want to talk to mess in South Africa, that people who choose to remain organically human are being boxed out of the system. And I think one of the reasons that hasn't come to America yet is because people realize the high propensity for violence to emerge. But it's an interesting question, which not enough people are asking, which is why the governments of the world are so gleefully destroying the civilization around them. What is it they know that we don't, or what is it they're, or maybe it's just straight up sociopathy. I mean, it's possible, right? It's hard to assign a good motive to it, and figuring out what the bad motive is something we really have to do, because the ultimate thing is, whether you, even if you believe, take the most generous interpretation that you believe that these vaccines are necessary, you're still going to cause a war by doing this. And I will tell you, the research out there just doesn't bear it out. In fact, you look who's actually getting sick, and once you separate for the fact that they play games with the test numbers, they use different standards, as was it the old George W. Bush saying, the soft bigotry of low expectation in terms of numbers of cycles anyway. You would begin to discover very quickly that the people who are getting sick are the people who are supposed to be most safe. And I think people need to be aware of that, we are not living in a safe world. I don't think there's any good guarantee around it. I think, living close to the land and living apart from people who you don't know and trust, you don't share your beliefs, is something you got to begin doing now. We've begun on that sort of odyssey, and I recommend you guys do the same for your own health and safety, and find communities that make sense, and begin changing your life and reorienting the principles that make sense. We're going to have to take, even to survive this, you got to take steps backward before it goes forward. And believe me, when you get easy, ready-made solutions, I wouldn't trust them either. That's when deception comes in there. So, but you have to make your decisions. And hey, we're all grown up now. We've been on cruise control for a very long time of our civilization, and it's about to crash into a wall. And you tried hitting the brakes, but it won't work because you're on a slick. So you're going to have to pick how you're going to crash land out of this. And I know that's a hard lesson for people, but it's genuinely what I believe. Having food supplies, having energy supplies, absolutely think the passports are coming to the USA. I think they'll come in September. I think they want to try to get the kids vaccinated before the fall season. And I think we are seeing a lot of hints that maybe even wars in the offing with China, but we'll see. But yeah, I think they're absolutely going to come here. They'll wait till the flu comes around, and then they'll say we're having a terrible season because of, or branded as, remember, we didn't have the flu at all last year, if you believe what they told you. I don't know if I believe that, but that's what they told you. So expect this to be an especially virulent year. And, the reality is, anyone who studied COVID seriously in terms of the genetics of it cannot help but conclude this was something that's artificially modified. If they can do it once and they do it to political ends, they can do it again. And whether you think it was the Chinese government, whether you think it was the American government, whether you think it was something above and beyond in a cabal, it doesn't really matter. You're going to have that problem. And, I don't think we can get around it. So I do think it's coming. I think it'll come in September, like I said, maybe October, certainly before the end of the year, because the economy's breaking, hyperinflation is starting. We talked in the last episode about how much food costs were. Things are not getting cheaper. For those of you who are in crypto or metals, I would say if you have dollars and you have fiat, you better be converting it into something that has some value, because its purchasing power is going to the toilet each day. And this $6 trillion infrastructure bill ain't going to do a damn thing to help it. It makes a good investment. And those of you who've been around a while, you know what I'm talking about. So those are things, that I think you should. And I'm curious about crypto. I mean, I know a lot of people here are invested in it. I keep an eye on it. Let's put it that way. And I don't know. The market, from what I hear and what I read, there are massive shorts being played by institutional investors who are willing to lose money like crazy to keep the market artificially induced downward. And whales are manipulating the market, but eventually currency will be digital. And whether it ends up being CDDBs or if it ends up being something different. But then again, the problem is, if it ends up being you have to be part of this network to use it, you can't buy and sell. We imagine that, just like with the internet, we imagine with cryptocurrency that it allows us a way around the system. When you invest in the digital world of technology, which is inherently surveillable, you are not investing in privacy. You're never doing that. You think you are, but you're not. You want real privacy, you just got to live apart. You get closer to the earth. And I know that sounds crazy, and I'm not really as much of an anarcho-primitivist or whatever that would sound like, but I do think that that's the reality. I mean, when you start to look at the computing realizations of what this means, it means ciphers are going to go down the trash, which is one of the problems I actually have. I've talked about it with cryptocurrencies, is I think quantum decryption is going to catch it fast. And I've talked to some people a lot more aware than I am, and I put some things in front of them, and they had a pause. So we'll see. If it's not here yet, it will be soon. How long do I think food shortages will be before they will be noticeable? I think it will be really noticeable with the harvest that doesn't come in. Usually, the way the food supplies work around the world, in America especially, is you try to keep a year's supply around, and then you get around to the harvest season. 2020, 2019 were really, 2020 was really disrupted by COVID, so we kind of been surviving off extra things. Trade agreements with China kind of messed up now. Globally, shortages in production due to weather, the terrible droughts out west. We've had flooding in all sorts of places. You see Germany, the giant sinkholes out there. Food production is way below yield of normal this year, especially out in the United States West, due to the problems. And they've had locusts for the last couple of years in East Africa and Saudi Arabia. So everyone's kind of fighting over the same supplies, and the U.S. isn't going to really have people help us. Canada's kind of a questionable ally, not because they dislike the Canadian people, but because of their government, and problems in Latin America as well. A lot of things happening. I know Argentina is having some issues, Brazil as well. So I think when the harvest doesn't come in right, we're going to start seeing a lot of the problems begin to be much more obvious. And as that happens, and watch Ice Age Farmer if this is your thing, by the way. Christian does a much better job than I would. But I would expect that it will become really obvious. And I do know this. I've heard Mike Adams had his, he was talking with his contractor on Natural News, and he was saying that they won't sign contracts past the end of September. And I've read similar sorts of problems. And remember, in September, the stimulus support for a number of people will end. So it's going to be a really interesting time. A lot of things may go badly. I do think that one thing you will have a very, very hard time getting in the future is animal proteins. If that's something that's important to you, you better learn how to be doing it yourself. I think that's a good piece of advice. And I think if you can have stable starches, I think you better have 2 years worth of food. And, the problem is people will know about it. So you need some friends too. And the ability to have some food production is really important. So we'll see what ends up happening, but famine is not going to be far. You have temperatures in the 120s in Canada. You kind of wonder. I live in a very quiet part of Maine where nothing ever happens, praise Jesus. And I often wonder if it's the case that, we just don't know how bad it is because our little part of the world isn't hit that bad. And if you look around the world, you really take a second and look at all the disasters around the world. And these are disasters that have never been seen before. Some of these temperatures, these sinkholes, buildings falling off. Are we in a time that's never been, that's unlike any other in history? And it's something to watch, and we'll talk about it together. So let me say a quick prayer in closing. If you have any last-minute ones that I can answer in like one sentence, throw them up. Heavenly Father, just pray that, the words I give this evening will be helpful to people, that they reflect your will, not my own, and that you look and you know what's best for everyone, Father. So you just guide these people who are listening in their lives, guide them to safety and guide them to your way. Because, as much as we're trying to save our lives, we know the real battle is to save our souls. And hopefully with repentant hearts, we can find our way to you. And with your wisdom, we can help and guide others. We know the harvest is out there and the harvesters are few. So help us who want to look. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. God bless each and every one of you. That's what I got. Days ahead, I'll probably come on, talk about some political stuff. We'll see. I don't want to be part of America. I really don't. I want New England apart. We'll take our friends in the Maritimes and maybe upstate New York. There's a long conversation. I actually studied the history of Rochester, of all places. It's a shame what's happened to some of those towns and cities, but totally different story. Anyways, God bless. You guys have a good night. Do not get punctured. Let that be the end of your punctuation. The question mark should be an imperative no. We need a no mark. I don't know. What would it be like exclamation, I don't know what that would be. Maybe we'll have to design one, Make it an upside down V. That would be funny. That would look like a pyramid. That would look Masonic. That wouldn't work. All right. It's getting late. I'm getting loopy. God bless each of you. Have a good night.